Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630, WMAL.
7:07 on the Morning Majority. Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, Kerry Pickett in for Mary Catherine. Will be back next week after climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. What a task that was. Standing by on the phone right now. You know, this guy, I spent the first days of my Washington career covering this guy, and then I spent a good fair amount of time with this guy as one of my colleagues, and I really came to appreciate the man that he is. He's a lovely fellow and a smart guy. Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North is on the line. Ollie, how are you?
Brian, it's great to be with you again. Happy Thanksgiving to you and Brian and Kerry and all the crew at WMAL.
Well, thank you very much.
Sir.
Thank you. It's good to hear your voice, Ollie. Okay, look, let's get right to something that's in the news right now, and that's the situation in Iran. I mean, if you look at all the reporting, it does appear that Iran is moving dangerously close to having a nuclear weapon. In this big debate we had last night, a lot of talk about what we should do about Iran. Everything from we need to be proactive, we got to support Israel, to Ron Paul's position is stay out of it, it ain't our business. What do you think, Ollie?
Ron Paul certainly did get Blitz.
Yeah, he kept calling Blitz.
Brian, as you remember from your days here, we're not allowed to watch that other network. I did watch it. Let me just my takeaway. Gingrich has more foreign policy experience than all the rest of them combined, and it showed, I think, yesterday. I think that the answers that you got reflect the frustrations everyone is feeling over the way this administration has mishandled not just Iran, but the whole of the Middle East. I mean, the images that were coming up in the middle of the debate about what's happening in Tahrir Square in Cairo are an example of how badly this administration has handled what they wanted to call the Arab Spring, now turning into the Arab Winter, the atrocities that are occurring in neighboring Syria, the threats to Israel, which are real. Here, let me give you a perception from my experience out there that none of them really touched on. Israel is coming to the point of no return. You know, as you know, Brian, and because you've been over there, I've certainly been there a lot, over every public building in Israel, particularly in Jerusalem, the capital, you'll see the signs that say in both Hebrew and in English and in other languages, never again. And that's a signal that the Israelis are not going to sit there and wait for the Iranians to put a warhead on the end of one of their intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they have thanks to the Chinese, the Russians, and the North Koreans.
Right.
And they're building nuclear weapons. Even the IAEA, always reluctant to identify a nuclear perpetrator here, they've said in that annex that they just published last week, there is no doubt in anybody's mind they are on a path in a very near term to having nuclear weapons.
Be afraid.
The Israelis are not going to sit there and wait for it to happen.
All right, Newt Gingrich summed it up, I thought, pretty nicely last night when it comes to Iran. He said there are three choices. There's the ability to change the regime without military force, without war, which is what you want more than anything else. Regime change with war, or let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Is that the way you see it right now? And of those three scenarios, which one do you think is more likely to happen?
Well, I think what is most likely to happen is that this administration will not impose the kinds of sanctions, unilateral sanctions, that would make a difference. And let me describe what that is, because we saw it in the Reagan administration. It was started under Carter, and it persisted until it changed South Africa. And the sanctions are very simple. By executive order, the President of the United States orders the Department of Treasury to do no business, no country that does any business with any company inside Iran. I'm not just talking about the Iran Central Bank. I'm talking about no country that does business with Iran of any kind can do any business in the United States. He has the authority to do that. What that means is that Siemens, which is an enormous company in not just Germany, but right here in the United States, can no longer put in a fuse box, a circuit breaker, in any place in Iran. Not just in their nuclear facilities. You can't do it. You can't replace a street light.
But how do you know if Siemens is actually going to be to do that? I mean, how do we know that Siemens is employed by the Iranian government?
Well, because look at the annex to that to the IAEA report.
I mean, we know it now, but I mean, how are we going to know for sure that they're out? Or some other company's going to do it?
If they'd like to, and I'm picking on Siemens, but you could do it with any tire manufacturer. By the way, it was tires that really did in South Africa. If you want to do business in the United States, you have to show us affirmatively that you're not doing any business with any Iranian company. I mean, it's
interesting.
That's what changed apartheid.
Colonel,
it's not these phony sanctions being imposed by the United Nations. It was United States sanctions of all kinds across the board that did it. That would bring about regime change.
There was a back and forth that was going on between Bachmann and Perry. And Perry, of course, saying not one single dime to Pakistan, unless they can prove to us that we can actually trust them. Yet Bachmann went off saying, look, we have to know where these nuclear weapons are and make sure that Al-Qaeda is not going to go off and take them away and then bring them over to New York City and have some disaster happen. What are your thoughts on that, really?
Well, Carrie, she's right. But you don't have to give the foreign aid that we're giving today. I mean, it's a fine line between doing things to support, and we do have friends in Pakistan. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. A lot of damage was done on May 2nd when this administration decided to reveal what our colleagues in the media erroneously refer to as SEAL Team 6. It's not. Nav Spec War DevGru is the actual definition, the actual term that's used to describe that unit. When they went and did their little TikTok and said, here's who did it, here's how they did it, here's where they did it, and what they did terrible damage to the friends that we do have in Pakistan. It made it much more difficult for them. So having now taken that step, what this administration has got to be able to find a way to do is keep the friends that we've got in Pakistan working with us. And that means some kinds of aid. It's not the kind of blanket foreign aid that we hand out all over the world. I think, to a certain extent, Ron Paul is right. We ought not to write big checks to people who simply make rich people richer in poor countries. The bottom line of it is, Bachmann is correct. We've got to keep those relationships going with the friends that we do have there, because those nuclear weapons falling into the wrong hands would be devastating to us.
Hey, very quickly, and we just have about a few seconds left, your thoughts on sequestration and how it might impact the military if they have to do serious budget cuts. Is this something we should be concerned about?
Yeah, very much so, Brian. And there's a lot of our colleagues out there and talking about the fact that, well, it doesn't really happen until 2013. It happened today. Right today, you've got people scrambling inside the Pentagon to do 20% cuts in military personnel, construction cuts, stop building ships, because you can't build three-quarters of a ship and put it in the water, cut down the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter production line, stop research and development on new anti-air and anti-air-to-ground missiles, stop ballistic missile defense installations that will protect the American people. I mean, it's unconscionable that this president, his lack of leadership, has allowed us to start disarming in the midst of a war. It's never happened before.
Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, it is so good to hear your voice and good to hear from you, Ollie.
Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, my friend.
All right, get some good turkey and dressing, okay?